But since I'm the researcher...
Assessment number 3. Nice and cozy. All right, what is going on, world? This is video, I think almost 7 or 8 now in the Neurohacking series. You guys know Ben by now, or you better. And this is the 3rd assessment, so we just went over a whole ton of stuff. And where should we start here?
So this is the point in the program where habit formation starts to become a little bit easier. At first, you have to have a lot of structured systems. So we talked about what have the effects been in terms of overcoming resistance in repeated training, and maybe you can talk about what that has felt like.
Yeah, so I kind of mentioned how I think in the first week or so I wasn't doing the best with the meditations. I found that guided meditations were working a lot better for me. So according to Ben and what I was suggesting to him, I started doing guided meditations from YouTube, and I started to keep the pressure on myself and try to develop it into a habit. And after the first week it wasn't working the best, so he suggested I do like hourly check-ins, and from those I've really been noticing a change and an effect, and it carrying over into the meditations, and that I can slip into them a lot easier. I think I mentioned to you on day 10 or something, I'd have to double check my calendar, but I made sure I circled it, the meditation where it was like, I had it in the morning, I was like, wow, that was the easiest one I ever had. Like, I think I messaged you and been like, dude, like this is crazy. And you're like, it's actually happening now. And that's probably where for myself in the past, I felt discouraged, because I find for myself, it usually takes, 7 to 8 days for me to get into stuff. But when it was like, I'm still not seeing results after 10 to 12 to 15 days, I would get discouraged with meditation. But yeah, everything's becoming very habitual now, so I think we're stepping things up and intensifying the programming.
And that's why, the way I structure in terms of times, 2-week blocks is typical habit formation. I like to have a little bit of space as well. So sometimes it takes 3 weeks, depending on the person. When I work with people who have crazy schedules, like a single mom who's also in law school, they typically need a little more time to adjust. So it's good that your brain is essentially learning what's expected of it. Because we tend to think of our brains themselves as one thing, and they kind of are, but the brain isn't always pursuing your best interests. It's pursuing the path of least resistance. And I was just explaining before we turn the camera on that you want to approach that tipping point where that is the path of least resistance, that meditative state. And that's why it's exciting that we're going to be starting the more intense Buddhist methodologies of meditative training, which someone like Peter with high motivation will probably be able to accomplish and benefit from, but it's really not for everyone because it's very difficult. That's why not everyone's doing like sabbaticals to Tibetan mountains. We're going to try and incorporate some of those principles here. Maybe you can talk a little bit about the subjective changes. Other than habit formation, have you experienced any changes in the way that you're perceiving or behaving?
Yeah, so when Ben was first grilling me here, when I first got in on how everything was going, I mentioned to him that I feel like I'm a lot calmer now. Like, I still have that intensity. Like, I still, when I'm focused on something I'm passionate about, I'm all in on it. But now it's like when I'm walking down the street or something not serious is going on, and I'm doing these kind of check-ins, it's reinforcing me and be like, why am I being so intense about this point or about something that's going on? And same thing like in terms of conversations as well. So when I'm talking to someone or considering what I'm going to say, like here on camera as well, I still find that there's these ums and ahs, like little breaks, but all in all, it's a lot more, and this might come over the development of this whole programming, but it feels like there's just a smoother flow with everything, that I'm not like, oh, did I just say the right thing? When was it the right thing? And it's like, considering what I'm about to say next, it's just kind of letting it all go and happen. And I feel more confident in the conversation and the dialect I'm using and stuff. So
it's really interesting and falls along the lines with some of the effects that have been studied in meditative states, in brain imaging. They look at something called the default mode network, which is a network of neural systems in the brain that process self, and it's meditation down-regulates that network, and so those problems of self-talk start to get reduced, and self-consciousness as well. So it's a little bit of kind of what you touched on there, and I think with the check-ins, the importance of the check-ins is because there's a balance of forces when it comes to the command and control systems in the neocortex, the higher parts of the brain. There's an interplay of two forces. One is perception. So that's the ability to perceive internal states of thought, emotion, sensation, and action, which is to actually direct those forces. And the cognitive, the executive functions of cognitive ability, they're the vehicles by which we perceive and act on those states of being. So that's why you're starting to get some of those shifts in how your perception is moving, and that's also why it's becoming the path of least resistance, for that meditative state. And it's important to note that we're not trying to transform your behavior in a way that you're just always calm, because you do want to have that passion. You want to be able to move to states of extreme focus and intensity, when you're working on something, and it's important that we manage that in a way that's effective for your goals too. One of the things we talked about before we turned the camera on was, as an entrepreneur and as a founder, you face situations of intense pressure, either huge opportunities, huge risks, fears. You'll encounter people that doubt you, that will tell you that your idea isn't good, and you need to be resilient to those highs and lows. And this type of training is really effective for high pressure situations, both in emotional intensity, but also intellectual intensity, because you can take extreme levels of work to accomplish these things.
So should we talk a little bit too maybe about how we're changing things now, or the planning and structuring, because we're intensifying things now. I have a new protocol to do in the morning. How much of that can we talk about?
Yeah, there's a few things we can talk about. So right now, we've kind of laid the groundwork for the brain to say we're going to be lifting heavy objects, but now, the analogy I might use is we want you to throw a cinder block into a basketball hoop. You've built up your strength, but now it's time to direct it towards purpose and have more precision. And we're also moving into some computerized training paradigms. I won't say which one specifically, but they're designed to impact working memory and executive control. So that's pretty interesting. We're moving from about 30 minutes a day of training to about an hour and 10 minutes of training. This is the part of the program that most people struggle with, because the level of difficulty is very high, and it's also the games are boring. They're not like playing Fortnite. It's a challenge. So I always warn people beforehand, be prepared to be frustrated and be prepared to push through. And the reason why I put this closer to the end of the programs is to build up that mental fortitude and willpower so that you can push through.
S K R
60. Whoa! Oh, that was a big. Nicely done, man.
I felt like there wasn't as many.
It's inhibition of action as well as deliberate action when the answer is correct.
Oh, okay.
That's why it's training that system of those two, the interplay of those two things.
I want a reward now.
I gave you a high five. That's a social reward.
I see.
It works for my students.
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
Yeah, because it produces oxytocin, and now you look.
No, it makes a lot of sense when you think about it. Is that when you keep failing and failing and failing, like and then you're adding reward systems into that as well too. It's like you're building up like this muscle in your body almost, and it's that makes 110%, and that's what I say through this channel a lot, is to go out there and experiment, learn for yourself. You have to fail to know what you want to do. You gotta, if you want to know what your passions are, you gotta first build skills and knowledge. You don't know if they're gonna be needed upon your life task when you're 70 and you actually do accomplish that thing, but that's how you learn. You just fail and fail and fail.
Yeah, another thing we're working on, it's kind of cool, and I'll just briefly mention it, is we're hacking the neurobiology of reward and motivation during this component. So Peter is essentially turning his brain into a video game, which is a really cool component of the program that you can apply to almost anything in your life moving forward. But the reason that we do that is because we are, in evolutionary biology, we're primates that are seeking reward, and reward, it really is a resource. So you need to kind of communicate to your brain what matters. And this is like the biggest problem that students face when they are studying a subject that's boring, because the subject matter is disembodied from meaning. Like, it's not like they're gonna get a mate necessarily like right after their exam, or they're not getting a bushel of bananas from like learning a certain component of calculus. So that's what a lot of students struggle with. So that's really cool. It's one of my favorite parts of this program, is learning to hack your own motivational systems through gamification. It's pretty sweet.
Well, and it also calls into question, like, why aren't we using some of these methods in education and in school?
If only someone created some sort of video game that does stuff like that.
Yeah, or like some program that major CEOs could go to optimize their brains and stuff. Like
that's enough self-promotion from you, though. That's fine.
Awesome. Well, that's it for us, guys. That was the third assessment. We're now going to the third week of these neurohacking experiments. This has absolutely been a blast so far. Like, I'm starting to see differences and changes, and it's really cool. It's awesome because as I mentioned in the past, like, I've experimented around with meditating before, but because I haven't had something I had to stay upon, and because I wasn't seeing results, I got quite discouraged and didn't keep up with it. But now that I'm on a program, and now that I'm seeing results, and I'm around people who are implementing these types of aspects of life into their day-to-day lifestyle, and I'm seeing results on them as well, it's making me really want to make this a part of my life, like just like my workouts every day. So.
Well, we're trying to improve outcomes. So, we don't just do this stuff to become like really crazy mentally strong. We actually want to accomplish things, and that requires us to be mentally strong. So that's why it's so important for us to talk about those goals and make sure that what we're doing is actually supporting that and not arbitrary. So you're not just like have crazy huge biceps, but you're running marathons, and it's just not relevant.
I was just gonna draw it to that connection of like being a crazy power lifter or being an all-out bodybuilder. Is like, yeah, but also there's a point where you reach that negative where it's like, is this even adding positivity to your life, or you're pushing this to such a crazy level that you just want to have the biggest brain, or be the smartest, which could be a good thing. But so that's it for us, guys. Catch us on the next video, and we'll see you then. Make sure you guys go follow Ben, follow him on Instagram, go check out TrueFocus. We will see you guys in the fourth assessment.